17. When they were a mile above the hive, the mist had cleared enough to use optical magnifiers to good effect. Sure enough, there was a war going on down there. As vicious a war as Alex Kozlowski could imagine. Thousands of struggling bugs going at each other, fangs and talons. The ruddy landscape was running with alien parts, alien blood, spasming monsters. How long had this been going on? Kozlowski's best guess offhand was that this was just the latest of many attacks. She saw alien skeletons littering the landscape. One more battle. That wasn't all the crew of the Anteater saw, though. "Run this over with me again, Begolly," said Grant. "Very quickly, sir. The creatures have had a freak genetic offshoot. Normally, a queen mother would stamp this out immediately. With no queen mother, though, another colony has been allowed to take root and thrive. As for the possible differences caused by the recessive gene theory, yes, we'll just have to examine them closer, won't we?" The most important thing the magnified view on the screen pointed out was that Begolly's theories were entirely correct. One set of bugs had a vague reddish cast. The rest, the defenders, it could be seen, because they were the ones streaming from the portals of the huge hive below, were the usual dark color that Kozlowski was accustomed to. Begolly whooped. "What did I tell you? And 10 to 1, they've got unpredictable internal differences. I can't wait to find out. There's also got to be other kinds of life on this planet that have learned to survive the Xenos. If possible, I'd like to check on them." "Celebrations later, fella. For what, I'm not sure. They all look nasty as ever. And as for other forms of life, yeah, I guess the critters have got to eat something. But that's not why we're here, is it?" Kozlowski unhooked her belt and hurried up a place beside the pilots. "Okay, fellows, I got this wonderful idea. You usually use force impellers as well as a few retros to land, correct?" "That's right. Anything to stop us from using the thrusters to land? That should cook a lot of them pretty good." "Sure. Lots of fuel consumption, though," said Fitzwilliam. "We just need enough to get back. We've got plenty to spare for that," said Tanerez. "I could do a configuration of the primaries and tertiaries that would do the trick." "Good. Then do it. Burn the bastards and make sure they're well done." "Okay. That looks like the main entrance to the hive. Not as close as we'd like, but it's the only option," said Fitzwilliam. "That'll be just fine," Kozlowski said, after studying the computer schematics that the pilot had called up on the screen to illustrate the lay of the land. "You'd better sit back down, Colonel, and buckle that seatbelt. Rockets are a little bit rougher than force impellers," suggested Fitzwilliam. "So I've noticed." The craft was rumbling and rocking like a son of a bitch. Kozlowski stumble-walked back to her chair, strapped herself in again, and watched the action, eyes gleaming. The Anteater slowed down. There was a mighty wrenching as the rockets cut in. Fitzwilliam was right. It felt like they were riding a jackhammer down. She had to clench her teeth to keep them from rattling. She looked up to the magnification screen. The bugs had stopped fighting. Some were waving their heads as though attempting to look up. to make out the source of the terrible rumbling in the sky with their primitive photosensors. "I hope the bastards don't have the sense to run," she said under her breath. "Unfortunately, the instinct for survival is paramount in the creatures, yes," said Bagali above the roar. "They're disoriented, but as soon as they sense the presence of the ship, they'll start to scatter. Fortunately, there are enough of them clustered that they can't scatter fast." "Can we go down quicker?" said Kozlowski, excited. "Not and get the effect you want," screamed Fitzwilliam. "Besides, we want 'em good and crisp. We don't want any of that blood eating away at the hull or support struts," said Tenerez. "True, very true. Come on, Kaz, use your head, not your hate and bloodlust." She looked up again at the screen. The shadow of the craft showed now, spread like a blot on the land and a mass of aliens, who began to scurry. The shadow narrowed, darkened. "Shit!" cried Tenerez. "That outcropping over there." "Yeah, I see it," said the other pilot. "I'll take her another 25 meters away. Tight fit, but I can land this baby on a dime." The confidence in Fitzwilliam's voice encouraged her. She could feel the shift of the ship. It slewed sideways and started down again, catching a bunch of the bugs by surprise. Unable to take her eyes off the scene, she watched as the rocket flames covered and consumed hundreds of the beasts. Hundreds more, not directly in the fire, nonetheless burst into incandescence at the horrible heat. Fried. "Incredible," she whispered. She watched as long as she was able as the aliens were immolated. A black swath of alien ash. Lovely. The anteater in just a minute had wiped out enough to fill a couple of nests back home. Unfortunately, it looked like there were plenty left to take their place. "Hold on a moment. Scorch the ground a little more before we land," said Fitzwilliam. "We've got about all we can. I just want to make sure these below are properly cooked." "Sure." The craft jerked and hung for just a few seconds. Smoke was curling up now past the viewports, obscuring the scene. Kozlowski closed her eyes. After images of the skeletal demons torching up flickered across her vision. Then the ship descended again, this time landing on its struts with a wobbling jolt. It swayed, then stilled. A red light shifted on. "All right, grunts," snapped Kozlowski. "We've got ourselves an emergency combat landing on our hands. It's showtime." Now everything was in the hands of an Irishman named Seamus O'Connor, and the marvelous new technology at his fingertips. O'Connor was a guy she didn't know that well. He was a technician who'd helped develop the procedure he was about to use. A sandy-haired gentleman with a soft voice and a twinkle to his eyes in social situations, but a rock-solid attitude of concentration during briefings and exercise. He looked like the kind of person who got a job done and then went off to the pub to play pipes and whistles and have a few pints. She looked out at the heaving mass of xenomorphs, outlines in the suit. And if that didn't work, they might as well just take off again, out of here. "All right, O'Connor," Fitzwilliam's voice crackled through the lobaphone. "I've cut the engines. The smoke is pretty much dissipated. Do your duty before any of the things put on their boots and stomp back in." "Roger, Skipper." Corporal Seamus O'Connor scratched his beard. He adjusted his grav chair for a better view of the control panel. He'd been training for this moment for months in virtual reality. Unfortunately, somehow it wasn't quite the same here. He'd never had Xenos crawling all over the place before. He'd never had a field of dismembered and burnt bugs to negotiate before. What Connor operated were the PEHs, the Perimeter Extension Harpoons. The Marines had learned pretty damn quick that in dealing with hostile life forms, i.e. bugs, force fields were quite useful. They'd been in use to a certain extent in the routine humdrum of company galactic life. But as soon as the nasty things with a penchant for destruction were discovered, necessity became the mother of invention yet again. Power was increased, but in landings like this one, it was rapidly discovered that the fields could only be beamed out a short circumference around the ship. In situations involving the need for expanded territory, their reach had to be expanded. Some kind of fence had to be constructed utilizing force field generating devices. However, in a theoretical hostile situation, neither men nor robots could be expected to trundle out and erect these posts. Hence the harpoons. They'd been tested before in the field, of course, out in deserts and plains, among rocks and what have you. You just played Moby Dick and shot them out into likely looking spots. When they thunked in properly, you pressed a button for remote control and zap. You had yourself a wide but snug-like force field cap within which to work. O'Connor's job now was to get those harpoons out. He touched the button and the ports opened. He did a quick analysis, adjusted the aim, said a prayer, and fired. 4 harpoons, each 7 meters tall and 2 thick, burst from their ports, sailed out into the alien atmosphere, trailing their power cables like baited hooks tossed from fishing rods. They sailed majestically and gorgeously. "Come on, beauties," thought O'Connor. "Hit your marks." The sharp points capable of boring into rock struck the surface of the alien planet, and marvel of marvels, stuck. "Bullseye!" O'Connor cried. The radio crackled. "No time to rest on your laurels. Looks like these bugs haven't been discouraged much. They're coming back in. No problem." O'Connor leaned over and pulled the switch. The post sparked. A shimmer of power traveled down the lines and then spread like electric coloring in water, connecting the posts, the cables, and swirling along the ground. "Outwall aviation activated has been initiated," O'Connor reported, a note of triumph in his voice. Dozens of aliens caught in the power grid were simply sheared in half. Others, heading back in towards the lander, simply bounced off the field, limbs and heads bent or smoking. O'Connor grinned to himself and put the field on automatic. He'd done his job. Now the troops were going in to do theirs. This was why they had worn their suits, so they could go into action at a moment's notice. "We've got some cleaning up to do, people," said Kozlowski, motioning for the troops to hurry along into the hangar deck. "This is what we came to do." The rest of the crew already had their helmets on, so she couldn't see what their faces registered. "It's why we're drawing a salary." She put her own helmet on, tongued on communications. "Gentlemen," she said, "I do believe we're ready." "Roger, Colonel. Hatchway opening initiated." The carbines, plasma rifles, and other automatic weapons of the assembled rattled upward, positioning themselves for firing. No depressurization was necessary. However, the PSIs were not the same, so there was a distinct escape of air as the hatchway opened. Before her oxygen-rich mix started to whisper through her suit's ducts, she fancied she'd smelled the land beyond. Burnt carbon, burnt silicone, alien acid, never-ending death beneath an eldritch, evil son. She had a regulation upper pill in her hand, ready to take it. Looking out, though, she realized she didn't really need it. She threw it away. A surge of victory ran through her. "Come on, people!" she snapped through her microphone. Staccato calling of a parade into a battle on shores not made for humans. "Let's earn some money!"